You know, most people know that I prefer revolvers. I love revolvers. Most of my favorite guns are revolvers, but quite often I get asked, well, if you take revolvers out of the picture, what's your favorite semi-automatic handgun? Well, you know, I think most people know the answer to that already. And no, it's not a SIG. A lot of people think it's a SIG. It is a Beretta 92. The Beretta 92 is not only an elegant weapon, but it's one of the most battle-proven weapons you could possibly buy. One of the most battle-proven handguns on the market today, with the possible exception of the 1911. Now, I know a lot of people will say the Glock is one of the most battle-proven weapons. No, the Glock is not battle-proven. The Glock is contrived test-proven, and it is purchase-proven. They sell a lot of them, but as far as being tested on the battlefield in actual use, Glocks don't even come close to a Beretta 92. Now, you can say, oh, the Norwegian Special Forces uses a Glock, and all these other little militaries that use a Glock all you want, still doesn't change the fact that more soldiers have carried a Beretta M9 into combat than a Glock. Glocks have not seen anywhere near the real-world battlefield use of a Beretta M9, not even close. And when it comes to looks and feel and ergonomics and accuracy, boy, the Beretta M9 or the Beretta 92 just blows the Glock out of the water. Now, another question I get every now and then from people that already know I like the Beretta 92, and I actually got this question again just yesterday, is do I use my Berettas straight out of the box, stock the way they come, or do I modify them? And if I do modify them, what do I do to them? What do I think that I need to do to a Beretta to make it even better? Well, the answer to that is the Berettas out of the box are great, but I do like to refine my Berettas just a little bit. And when it comes to working on a Beretta, it's so easy to do. A lot of people like to talk about how easy it is to work on a Glock, but a Beretta is probably the easiest gun I've ever worked on, even easier than a Glock, which will be testament in this video when you see how little I actually cuss while I'm doing it. So today I want to make a video here showing you what I actually do to my Berettas once I get them out of the box, how I go about making what I think is probably the best semi-automatic handgun ever a little bit better. Now, the first thing that I'm actually going to do is address the trigger and try to make it more of a range/self-defense friendly trigger rather than the stock trigger that it comes with. When these guns come from the factory, they have more of a combat style trigger in them, and I want more of a range/self-defense trigger. So I'm going to have to change out the mainspring. Now, changing the mainspring on the Berettas is really easy. You just got to take the grips off here first. So let's get right to it. Now, always try to stay with factory-approved parts and stay within manufacturer recommendations when you're modifying your gun for carry. But if you want to modify it outside of that, be aware of the risks that you take doing that and decide if it's a risk you're willing to take or not. See if the benefit outweighs the risk. But like I say, it's always up to you to take as much risk as you want. But like I say, if you want to minimize your risk, use factory parts and stay within factory specifications. Now, the mainsprings on these guns are very easy to change. I've never seen a gun that's easier than a Beretta. All you do is put it with the bottom down and just put some pressure down on that little lanyard loop there, like that. And then just push this little pin out. Comes right out. Then you just pull the little cap off and the little spring falls right out. Now, the spring kit I'm going to be using to replace the mainspring is a Wilson Combat tuning kit here. So I've got the mainspring in here as well as a couple of different recoil springs. I'm also going to change the recoil spring to a little bit heavier spring. Like I said, this is so easy to change. You just stick the little spring right down in here. There's a little rod down in there, and you just slide it right over it, and it's changed. Now, I'm not going to put back in the plastic housing that came with it because the gun does come with a lot of stock plastic parts nowadays. They have metal in them, but they're mostly plastic. So I'm going to change out a lot of those parts while I'm doing this tonight. And the first one will be this little mainspring cover here, this little lanyard loop. I'm going to put an aluminum one in its place. I've got a bunch of parts for this gun laying around. I don't have to actually order anything. There's only one part that I'm going to need to order to replace the plastic parts on this gun, and that is the magazine release. But everything else I'll be able to replace. And I'll tell you which parts are plastic as I go here and that I'm replacing them. Now, to put the cap back in, just reverse the process. Put it in there, get it to where it's seated well. Just once again, put a little pressure on it. Slide the pin back in, and it'll go back in with no resistance whatsoever. And you've got it back in there. I can already feel a difference in the trigger. But we're not done yet. We're still going to do some more work to the trigger. Now, one more plastic part I'm going to change out is the trigger. Now, I know I should say polymer, not plastic, but to me it's plastic. I'm going to change out the plastic trigger. I got a couple of metal triggers laying around from where I've switched out some of the old metal triggers with short reach triggers from Wilson. So I'm just going to use one of the old metal triggers that I had from another gun in this one. And to make the trigger even a little bit better, I'm going to change out the old traditional style trigger spring with this little cam spring here that goes onto the trigger and see how much better that makes it. We all know what trigger springs look like. They're just a little piece of coiled wire like this right here. But this one from Wilson Combat has a little piece right here that actually locks into the trigger and has this little shaft and spring here that helps get rid of trigger stacking, so it makes the trigger a lot smoother. First thing we got to do to change the trigger is take off the slide stop. You just wiggle it out of place here. Don't bend up the spring while you're taking it out. Set it off to the side. Okay, now it's got to take the trigger bar off right here. And that's very easy to do. You just take this little spring out and it wiggles right off. Now I just got to wiggle the little trigger pin out here and it'll come out really easily and the trigger will fall free. And there you have the old polymer trigger. As you can see, it's metal and polymer, and it's got the old trigger spring in here that we're going to be replacing. So we can just throw this away. I'll never have any use for this polymer trigger again. Or, you know, I could just keep it around in case I ever need a spare. So, you know, it'll probably just go in my drawer of spare parts, you know, in case Armageddon ever comes. You know, I can never have too many spare parts. So this will just go in a drawer. Now let's just put the metal trigger back in and reverse everything we just did. Now I got to line up the bottom hole on the trigger with the hole on the sides of the gun here and put the little trigger pin back in. And it shouldn't be hard, and it should just go right in. There, it's in. And remember, do not put the trigger spring back in there. I see so many people do this mod on the internet and they put the trigger spring back in there. What's the point of changing it out if you're going to put the trigger spring back in? Do not put the factory trigger spring back. Now this little piece is just going to go down in there and go into that top set of holes in the trigger. If you look at the trigger closely while it's out, there's two sets of holes. This little piece goes in just like this with the little cam facing forward and the little, I guess, circle there pointing up. Goes right into those holes, and then you just put the thing back together. And you don't need to get it down into place yet. Just get it to where it's in those upper holes so you can put the other parts back on. Then you can put this into place. Slide the trigger bar back in here. Make sure it gets through the holes of the trigger and this thing. Put the trigger bar spring back in. Now we'll come back over on this side and put the slide stop back in here. All right, check to see if I got spring tension on my little slide stop here. I do, and I also have it on my trigger bar. So it's time to put that little shaft right there into place. To do that, you just push it back and slide it, snap it down into position. Then just check and make sure your trigger is working, which it is working. And you can see there how it's supposed to look once it's actually in position. It's just lined straight up and down right there with that little hole up at the top part here. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the slide here. And the first thing I'm going to change out, of course, is this guide rod and spring. I'm not going to use either of these again, so I can just throw them in the drawer of spare parts. Just get out my Wilson Combat fluted steel guide rod here to replace it with. And get the heavier recoil spring from the kit here, since I'll probably be shooting plus P in this if I ever carry it for self-defense. So I want a little bit stronger recoil spring. Just put that on that, set it aside for when I'm ready to reinstall it. All right, the only plastic part on the slide I need to replace is the safety right here. This safety is polymer, so I'm going to replace it with a metal factory one. I don't know if you can see up there, but right up above my finger there, there's two little pins in the safety. You can see the tops of them right here. These need to be pushed out. And I'm going to do that from the bottom here. Okay, the first thing I do once the pins are out are just pull off the offside safety here, or the weak side safety for me. It's not the main side. So just pull that out right there. Now I'm going to need a little baggie here, and I'm going to need to do a couple of different things with my hands at once here. I'm going to need to press up on the little firing pin safety here while pressing down on that little firing pin piece right there. And while I'm doing that, I'll just push in and rotate the safety up. And as you can see here, while I was doing that, I pushed the safety upwards to where it's up farther than it would normally be allowed to travel. And this is where I got to stick it in the little plastic bag. Let's close it up in the little baggie here and pop this piece out. And I think you already heard it spring out there. Actually, it shot out of the plastic bag. It went through the plastic bag. Well, maybe I should have had a little stronger plastic bag here. This actually penetrated the plastic bag. But what you're trying to keep from getting away there is that little plunger and spring, because you're going to need that on your new safety. Let's just pull this old safety out. This is the plastic safety, so let's just discard this, or actually by discard it, I mean throw it in the junk pile drawer. Now let's get our metal safety from Beretta here out, and we will do the replacement. Now, you know, I'm not real sure if I actually filmed me putting this back in or not. I don't remember if I did or I didn't. I looked up my camera. It's on standby. I don't know when I put it on standby, but all I did was reverse the process of taking it apart to put it back together. I ain't taking it back out again to do it again. If you want to look up how to do it, there's lots of videos online how to do it. It's simple. Okay, now I've put my new fluted metal guide rod back in and my new higher pressure recoil spring here. So now I just got to put the gun back together. Now I do have a little more resistance when racking the slide now. That's to be expected because I put a heavier recoil spring in there. But the trigger, oh man, the trigger is a lot nicer. I can already tell. Now I just got to put the grips back on there. I'm not going to use these plastic grips that came with it. I'm going to put those nice dark green aluminum grips from Hogue on there. I think they're going to look amazing on this gun. Definitely better than those plastic ones. So let's get those on there. One thing I love about aluminum grips is you don't have to be nearly as careful about over tightening them. They're not going to crack. Now, one thing you always got to do after you put on new grips is check your magazine. Yep, still works. Because one thing that sometimes happens when you put new grips on, they're not thick enough and the screws protrude too far into the well there and it keeps the magazine from dropping out when you release it. Okay, there we have it. It's all back together. Now, like I said before, the slide's going to be a little harder to rack now, but it's going to handle the recoil of Plus P ammo way better. And since I changed out all those trigger springs and everything, the trigger is so much better. The double action trigger is a lot better, and the single action trigger is amazingly crisp. And now almost all the plastic parts are gone. I've replaced everything with a metal part, so it's much more durable. The only thing plastic still on here is the magazine release. Like I said, I'm about to order one of those because I don't have any extras laying around that are metal. All the ones I have are plastic. But soon I'll replace that. And like I say, that takes a few seconds. Just got to take the grips off. And as you can see with those metal grips on there and the new metal parts, it just looks a lot better. And with those new springs and everything, it functions even better than before. So there's how you take one of the best guns ever made, and in my opinion, probably the best gun ever made, and make it even a little bit better. Let's see if I can find what I did with the screws. Why can't I keep a hold of freaking screws? I got a fucking birth defect that prevents me from keeping screws. Ah, there they are. You ain't even my real dad.